Hello viewers, welcome to CEC lectures. Myself Dr. Preeti Chakwani from Department of Computer Science, Arbat College, University of Delhi. So in this series of operating system concepts, we have covered all the standard typical modules which are under the purview of UG standard of this particular paper, which is operating system concepts. So I welcome you all for the last lecture in this series, which is about protection and security in the operating systems. Now if we talk about on very general lines that why this is important, that is the simple thing says we need to safeguard, we need to protect the user data, we need to ensure about the system integrity and prevent the unauthorized access, and that's why the protection and security for any operating systems is very much important. And this is what the agenda for today's lecture is, that we are going to read about the concepts, techniques and mechanisms which are required through operating systems in order to provide protection and security. Before going into details of the mechanism, let us try to understand the difference between the two words, which is protection and security. So protection basically refers to the controlled access which is provided to the system resources, or protection mechanism controls the access to the system resources. Which system resources I am talking about are file, memory, devices, CPU, everything else. And this is done in order to prevent unauthorized or unintended usage, and the goals of the protection system includes data confidentiality, integrity, availability and controlled access. While when we talk about security, so security is basically, you can say, is an different concept which focus on protecting the system against threats. What kind of threats I am talking about? These threats could be malware, data breaches, attacks and these kinds of things. So the secure objectives of the security include confidentiality, integrity, availability, authentication and non-repudiation, etc. So protection and security, although they go in although they go hand in hand with each other, but these two are we can say different concepts. So protection is moreover related to the access of the system resources which can be controlled, and security, we can say it's kind of an outer feature which is protecting the systems against the outer world, we can say. So when we talk about the threats and attacks, what threats and attacks we are talking about? All the standard threats and attacks which are malware, basically a malicious software which is designed to harm the system. Then we have viruses which generally infects the file, replicate themselves and then they spread on the resources. Then there are worms which are spread across the networks, Trojans or Trojan horses which disguise themselves as the legitimate programs, and apart from that we also have ransomwares which encrypt files for the extortion. We have adwares also in this category. We have spywares which gather some sensitive information. So all these things comes under threats and attacks. When we talk about unauthorized access, that means someone who is not authorized or someone without the proper authorization is trying to gain the access to the resources. And how this can be done? This can be done with the help of password cracking. This can be done by bypassing any security mechanism which is already employed, or maybe by exploiting any left vulnerabilities, we can say. This is going to result in data breaches. So data breach here is the unauthorized disclosure, or we can say theft of the sensitive information, such as any information. It could be personal data, it could be financial records, or it could be log records or something of that sort. Then we have one more term which is going on here is DOS, which is denial of service. So denial of service is flooding a system or network with excessive traffic or a request to overwhelm its capacity and make it inaccessible to the legitimate user. So just denial of service is flooding the system or the networks with illegitimate excessive traffic, so that the legitimate users can be denied access. And apart from this, we also need to deal with in terms of, when we talk about protection and security, we also need to deal with social engineering, which is about manipulating the individuals through deception or psychological tactics to trick them so that they can reveal some sensitive information, or they can grant the access. Now coming to what are the goals of security? So we want our information to be confidential, that is, it should be only accessible to the authorized entries. Then how can we ensure that? This can be ensured by using encryption techniques, using access control, which may provide which are going to play a vital role in maintaining confidentiality. Apart from confidentiality, we also try to maintain the integrity, which is about the accuracy and consistency of the data. This can be done by preventing unauthorized modifications, and we have parity sums, we have digital signatures, we have checksums in order to verify the integrity of the data. Then apart from confidentiality and integrity, we also need to ensure about the availability. It is such that the resources and services which are accessible must be accessible when needed, and this access should be free from disruption caused by the attacks or failures. Now how all these goals can be fulfilled, these goals of confidentiality, integrity and availability. So we have various mechanisms or various techniques in order to fulfill these security goals. Let us try to see one by one. The first one is authentication. So authentication says someone needs to verify the identity or of the user or any entity before giving the access for resources. This is going to prevent any unauthorized access. Now this authentication mechanism can include password, this could be biometric, or this could be any kind of cryptographic tokens. Passwords, when we talk about users provide a secret passwords generally that is checked against the stored credentials. Weak password or poor password generally lead to the security breaches. Apart from this password, one must have MFA, which is multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication requires a user to provide the multiple authentication factors, such as a password combined with a biometric scan, or maybe a password combined with a one-time password, or maybe a token for enhanced security. So there could be single factor authentication, there can be two-factor authentication, or there can be multiple factor authentication in order to make our security procedures more stringent. So one term which we seen was authentication, that is the we can say that includes password, as we have told you, or biometric or cryptographic token. Authentication is about verification of identity of users. Another term which is very important here is authorization. Authorization is about controlling the access rights and permissions to resources. That means who is allowed to access the resource, when and in which what mode. So for example, let us say we have a file, so it could be a read only file for someone, it could be a file in which the writing is also permitted for someone else. So depend what authorization or which kind of authorization for that particular file is being provided to the different users. So this is what you call authorization, which is about controlling the access rights and permissions to resources. Then this include access control list, which is ACL, then RBAC, which is role based access control, and mandatory access control, which is MAC. These are commonly used authorization mechanism. In this or in these type of authorization mechanism, one is supposed to determine the privileges and permissions granted to authenticated users or processors. So, which particular user or which particular process is allowed for which particular activity, that has to be determined by the what permission and privileges are being given. Now, three terms we have seen as the commonly used authorization mechanism. One is access control list ACL, another one is the role based access control RBAC, and mandatory access control. So, ACL, which is more commonly known as access control list, it defines the permissions for individual users or groups. It will specify who can read, who can write, or who can execute the specific resources or files or any other resources of that type. Then we have role based access control, which is RBAC, which assigns the permission based on predefined roles or jobs or functions. Users are granted access based on their roles. So, for example, someone is a clerk, he will be having a limited access, and someone who is a higher level manager will be having more liberal access to the resources. Then we have mandatory access control, which is in short form is known as MAC, which assign the access based on the labels or security clearances. A centralized security policy determines some access permissions. So, these security mechanisms are employed in order to grant the authorization of different resources. And this was about the term security. Now, coming to the next term of today's agenda, which is about the protection. So, data protection includes data confidentiality, which is done with the help of encryption algorithms. These encryption algorithm transforms the data into an unreadable form, protecting it from the unauthorized access. What kind of encryption algorithms are commonly used? These are symmetric encryption, which are AES, and then they have asymmetric encryption, which is RSA. So, all these these two are the names of the techniques which are widely used in cryptography. Within the data protection, along with the data confidentiality, we also need to maintain the data integrity. That means we need to say we need to ensure that the data remains unchanged, unaltered during the storage, or more specifically during the transmission. So, how are we going to check that the data which is already being stored on a device has not been tampered with? So, we have various techniques. For example, we have checksums, we have parity bits, or we have more sophisticated ideas like hash functions, which are SHA-256, which is going to generate a unique hash value for the data, allowing the verification of the integrity. If that hash value has been changed, that can be immediately caught up, we can say, and someone can raise a flag that the integrity has been breached. Apart from this, we also have various threats and attacks from malwares. We have viruses, we have other these types of external attacks like spyware, adware, and so on and so forth. So, coming to this malware protection, or coming to the protection from these threats and attacks, for viruses we can have antivirus software. That's a very general thing that is going to scan and detect the malicious software. It could be virus, it could be worms, or it could be trojans, in order to prevent the execution and spread, because these worms, trojans and viruses have the we can say tendency to spread over the resources, and then they block the whole system. Or we can have some signature based detection and signature based detection analysis. These are also commonly used techniques in order to provide the protection from the malware thing. Then we may have firewalls for external security. These firewalls can be in the form of software as well as in the form of hardware. The job of this firewall is to monitor and filter the network traffic in order to protect the unauthorized access and also in order to protect the malicious activities. So, we have various techniques like NAT, which is network address translation. Then we have filtration of packets and intrusion detection and prevention systems, which are there in order to provide and enhance security. Now, it is not about only the storage or operating system on which one must be very careful to maintain the security, protection and integrity of the data. The communication from one end to another end has to be secure in order to have a complete package of security. So, for secure communication one must employ some secure sockets layer, which are SSL, commonly known as SSL, or we can have some transport layer security. We are having some protocols that provide secure communication over networks, some encryption which is done especially for the data transmission. We can establish a secure connection with the secure connection between clients and servers, and we have HTTPS, which is the secure HTTP, that is there in order to ensure confidentiality and integrity. Apart from this, we also have one small but important concept, which is about the VPN. VPN as in virtual private networks. They create a secure and encrypted tunnel between the remote user or remote devices and a private network. So, for example, as you have seen after corona, many companies have given their employees the facility to work from home. So, VPN connections there are they came as a boon, because they are there in order to create a secure communication channel, or we can say a secure and encrypted tunnel between a user and a device or the employee which is sitting at home and the private network of the company. So, in order to establish that connection, VPN has to be used. This VPN protects the sensitive data while transmitting it over untrusted networks. So, there is the network between the employee and the organization, which is generally we can say a third party network, which is more commonly known as an untrusted network. So, use of this VPN is going to protect this sensitive data while transmission from one particular end to another end. Also, despite of all these measures and techniques, if let us say some theft or some unwanted activity has been happened into the system, that can be we can say that can be tracked with the help of auditing and logging. So, auditing and logging says system logs are there which records the events and happenings, activities, and these logs are being used for auditing, for troubleshooting and for the security analysis. Now, continuous and routine monitoring and analyzing the logs are going to help the identify what are the security breaches, what are the various potential vulnerabilities, what are the unusual activities which are going on maybe in a network or in a system or maybe on an individual machine. So, here in this lecture till this point, what all we have covered is basically we started with the two terms, which is protection and security. We have seen the meaning of protection and security both. Then we have seen what kind of threats and attacks are possible on a system. Then unauthorized access and data breaches, denial of service along with social engineering has been discussed. Then we came to security goals, which are confidentiality, integrity and availability, and we have also seen that what is the measure in what is the way in order to achieve these security goals. Then these ways comes under these ways are actually the authentication, maybe passwords or multi-factor authentication can be there. Apart from authentication, there is authorization, which is being ensured with the help of access control list, ACL, role based access control, RBAC, and mandatory access control, MAC. Then we have apart from that, this was about the security. Coming to the data protection and encryption, we have seen the data confidentiality account along with the data integrity. How this malware can be protected with the help of antivirus software, or there is one more technique which is firewall that can be used. And then for transmission over a network between client and server, the secure communication may employ the secure socket layer or maybe a transport layer security or HTTPS, and then we can also use the virtual private networks, which are VPNs. Even after this, if something has happened, that can be tracked with the help of proper logging. Also, auditing is very necessary in order to we can say detect, or in order to analyze the potential vulnerabilities or any unusual activities if going on within the system. Then we have security best practices. That means what are the practices which should be employed in order to maintain the security and in order to protect the data or the system from all these attacks and unauthorized access. So, one of the security best practices is the regular updates and patching, which is keeping the operating system and software up to date in order to address any security vulnerability. So, updation of the operating system and software is very important. Then any patches and any updates about the software often include some security fixes. So, these patches and updates should be we can say should be taken very carefully, and regular updates and patching should be done. Apart from this, the users are required to train about the security and its awareness. So, security awareness and education is also very important, which includes the training the users to recognize and respond to security threats, and it will also help preventing social engineering attacks, as we have seen, and improving the overall security scenario. Also, the backup and disaster recovery, which is about the regular backing up the critical data and ensuring the data availability is important. So, in backup and disaster recovery, one system must enable a recovery in the event of an security incident or hardware failure. So, if any hardware fails, or your system gets crashed, then your system must be in a situation to recover from that particular security incident. This comes under the backup and disaster recovery. This can be done with the help of whatever backup is already being stored on this anywhere else, maybe on a RAID drive, and all this concept of RAID drives we have already seen in our previous lecture. So, with this we are here to complete this topic of security and protection in operating system, and we have also we have covered all the general terminologies and the tools and techniques which are there to provide security and protection to a system. Here is a list of references which is being used for the preparation of lecture. Hope you have enjoyed one. This was all about the series of operating system concepts. I will see you in the new series. Till then, take care. Goodbye.